All right, welcome everybody. It's 1 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So my name is Stephen Krutzfeldt. I'm a pre-sales engineer here with CDI and your host for today's webinar. And today we're going to talk about metadata fields, too important to ignore. As we go through, please take as many notes as possible. I'll do my best to answer any questions you have also at the end of the webinar. You can post those into the little question box. If you take a look at your GoToWebinar floating window, you'll see there's a place for chat and a place for questions. I usually look at both of them. I guess if you can post them to the questions though, that'll be the one that I'll be focusing on. So today's topic is going to be focused around metadata. The intended audience is going to be Laserfiche administrators and advanced Laserfiche users, but that's a little bit misleading because metadata really does affect everybody who's working inside of Laserfiche. It's not just the administrators and the advanced users, although those are going to be the ones who probably make some of those decisions. But I would say that even if you're looking at Laserfiche as a possibility for document management, you'll find some value in this, I hope. So to help you follow along, the agenda is going to be to first look at some examples of metadata, what that actually means, what that entails, and what that looks like. Creating fields and templates. And then finally, we'll look at how we can take that metadata and actually incorporate it into workflow and different business processes as well. So moving forward, what is metadata? Well, at a very high level, metadata refers to additional data or attributes regarding a specific file. Now, metadata as a whole just means data about data. So it's additional attributes about something that's probably capturing data already. But in the context of Laserfiche, when we talk about metadata, we're really specifically talking about usually fields and templates. Now, a template is just a collection of fields. That template is usually something that is assigned to either a folder or to a specific document, and it has different fields and those different attributes that give some extra context and extra information about the file you're viewing. The example I'm showing here is an accounts payable template. This would typically go on something like an invoice or maybe a purchase order, a packing slip. It's going to capture information like who the vendor for that packing slip is, what that vendor account number is. If it's a PO or if it's an invoice and we have a purchase order number, we'll be able to see what the PO number is. Oh, sorry. Looks like I lost audio connection. Sorry about that. I said my audio kicked out there for a second. Hopefully you can all still hear me. So it's also going to be capturing things like the document type. So if it's an invoice, we'll see that it's an invoice. If it's a packing slip, it'll be labeled as a packing slip, and then so on down the line. Now the other side of this is fields. Now, like I said, a template is a list of fields, and these can be created and tracked separately. And you can also add additional attributes to a folder or to a file, regardless of whether or not the field is actually on the template. We typically like to have templates because similar documents, we will always want to track specific types of information. And we can even make those required, so that way no one's saving any invoices without also assigning an invoice number or something similar. Now the field types are important because the fields are what's going to make up the template, first of all, but also there are different types that exist. There's text fields where you can just type in pretty much anything. There are drop-down lists, so you can select a specific type or a specific field or a piece of data from the drop-down. There's dates, and there's dates and times as well. So we'll get into a little bit of the different field types too as we go forward. So with that, those of you who know me know that I don't like to dwell too much on PowerPoint when possible. It's much easier to explain and much more fun and entertaining, in my opinion, to go in and actually look at the different examples within the solution. So let's go ahead and start by just looking at how we've applied metadata in our system. So right now I'm logged into Laserfiche. I'm logged into the thick client. I'm looking at my Laserfiche business repository. As you can see, I've got a couple of different root folders here that are specifically around some of our different departments, like human resources, finance, things like that. Let's go ahead and start with clients. So if I open up my clients folder, I have a list of a couple different clients that they may be my personal clients that I'm managing. And if we right click on any one of these, we can see that metadata is a drop-down option on this folder. We pop that open, we start to see some information that's specific to this client's folder. So we can see the name of the client. Maybe we want to keep track of the main contact, what their home phone number is, the email, who the account owner is, the date it was created, and then we also have this active, inactive, pending. So now you can start keeping track of live information. Much of the metadata, usually it's kind of set and forget. Once it's there, most people are just going to search by it, sort by it, but not necessarily be making many changes. However, I do want to introduce this concept early because we'll take a look at this a little bit later on how we can incorporate that into different business processes. That by having an active and inactive status field here, we can actually use that to drive the movement of the folder and actually move it through a different process. If there are approval steps or if there's certain things like waiting for signature or something like that, we can incorporate that. I'm going to go ahead and look at another example here. We're going to go to accounts payable. I think I've got some invoices here. So now we're looking at a document instead of a folder. Well, documents can, of course, have metadata as well. So if we go to our fields, maybe that one doesn't have it, though. Let's try a different one. That's okay. Let's add one. So here we have an accounts payable template. And so now you can select things like from a dropdown, who's the vendor? You'll notice that it automatically populated the vendor account number. The way I accomplished this is I actually tied this back to a data field or a data set somewhere else. This one's actually looking at an external table in SQL. So you can have your templates looking out to SQL and maintaining data that way. That will give you the ability to make these different fields dynamic. And we'll take a little bit closer look at that here in just a second and how those dynamic fields can be accomplished. But think about having the ability to create a document and select the category and then have a dynamic subcategory come up based on that. So we can type in information like the PO number. We have a list of what the document type is. We select invoice, what the number may be, maybe the invoice amount, and the date. And then that way, when people start going out and searching for information like a specific vendor's invoice, maybe from a specific month, that metadata will make it easier for them to identify and find the specific document that they're looking for. So let's go ahead and pause and talk about why metadata is important. The title of today's event is Too Important to Ignore, right? Well, there's a couple of different reasons why we incorporate metadata. The biggest reason I would say is so you can find your different documents and folders, that it's a way to have additional information that you can search, sort, and filter by. Any one of those metadata templates can be used to actually create a separate column for any one of these. If we right click on our columns and go down to, actually this is going to be a bad example. Let's go back to our human resources instead. So if we go into human resources and we right click on our columns here and go down to more, I'm on browser and I'm selecting columns right now. It's going to have some basic generic or what it calls general columns that you can select from. And those are going to be the created, date, last modified, how many pages there are, etc. But then there's down here, you're going to start to see record management, accounts payable, client documents. These are templates that I've created. So these are different metadata fields. So if it's on the document or it's on the folder, we can now also have a column so we can see that metadata without drilling into each one and right-clicking and viewing the metadata that way. So I know that I'm looking at human resources folders here. So maybe I want to know who the supervisor is and what their position is. Well, I can go ahead and do that, just wait, and now you can see that for each one of these folders, it's looking at, Creed Bratton is in quality control advisor, Karen Filippelli's in sales, and then who they report to. It looks like most of them report to Michael Scott, and then one reports to David Wallace. So you can then sort and filter by that as well by just clicking on those. So it's kind of a neat feature. The second main reason for this, and much more probably relevant to my role than maybe some of yours, but the ability for workflow to identify and then know what to do with this different information. We rely very heavily on metadata in consulting to know how to write workflows to move different documents around, to assign different security levels and things to the different folders and documents as they come in. That many of our workflows start out by looking at the metadata to get some sort of information about what that next step is going to be. So if we know that when a new folder comes in and it's a regional manager, we know that another workflow needs to kick off and say, hey, regional managers need to be given, be added to the org chart. So that's a task that needs to be assigned to somebody. So that can then kick off a rule. So if you've got that if this, then something else, metadata is a great way to keep track of that. Another thing that I wanted to mention too is the ability to use reporting on metadata. If you're like us and you're keeping track of a lot of information, you have a specific folder for all of your employees, for example, maybe they have subfolders too. If you want to see how many active employees you have, or how many active employee folders you have anyway, an easy way to do that would be, it shows up a little bit nicer in the web client. So I'm going to jump over to that. I'm accessing the exact same repository now, just in the web. So that's why it looks a little bit different, but these are all the same. Let's go to our employee files. And actually, you know what? I changed my mind. Let's go to human resources and then select employee files. So in the web, what we can do, and this will work in the thick client too, but we can go up to this more actions, the ellipses, after we've selected a specific folder, and say generate report. And we want a metadata report. So here it'll open it up and say, all right, what would you like to view? And what report type would you like to see? And it can be text, list, Excel, I find kind of shows up the nicest. I think most of us are very familiar with how to use Excel, and it gives some more type of dynamic sort of report that we can start to play around with that data afterwards too. I'm going to take out some of this information by just double clicking on it because I'm not really interested in all of these. I do want the name, but I also want to start selecting my columns. And as we saw before, columns can be metadata fields. So I'm going to go down and specifically find my human resources. So what I'm looking for is last name, first name, department, and employee status. I'm just going to hit OK. And that's all there is to it. So this is going to go in there, look at the metadata, spin up a report based on those columns, and generate an Excel doc with all of that different information. This is also good to know that if somebody wants to see how many folders you have and how many have metadata or don't have metadata, it's another quick way to get a snapshot of your current repository. Let's go ahead and spread some of this out quick. So now, as you can see, all of these employees are active, which is good because they're all in my active employees folder. So it looks like it's correct. But it's given us their name, the name of the folder, and then first name, last name, their department, and their employee status. So why is metadata important? Well, it gives you the ability to report on your different files and folders. It gives workflow an easy way to identify information and then have it drive the next step in a process. It helps you to find your different documents. And overall, it's just going to give you a lot more information that if you were to go into any one of these documents, try and find out what is it, what's it about, when was it created, things like that, it's a lot easier to just take a look at a snapshot at the highest level than to go into each document or each folder and find the entire history of that. So that's some of the main value of metadata, and that's why we use it. Now let's take a look at how we set all of this up, because as you can see, or as you've seen in the past, I can right click and select a metadata template just by going to the drop down, although I don't really want to mess with these per se. But if I want to create a new document or a new folder, it'll pop open and say, by the way, it may pop up with this general. If you see this and think, oh, I don't have metadata on mine, just click that second tab that says Fields. And Fields, Templates, that's what we would call metadata. So if we select the Fields tab, we can then use the drop down to select some of our different templates. So maybe I have a client document that I've selected. So I've got a new client name, and the name is going to be I don't know, Reardon Steel. I can then select account paperwork, give it a subcategory, and if there's a document type, it'll show me that. Or I can go to compliance and select different subcategories, client contract, suitability, things like that. Maybe it's a questionnaire, or maybe it's just a customer identification or client contract. But if it's suitability, maybe it's a questionnaire, we can go ahead and add the account number too. We'll give it today's date and hit OK. So I was able to select that. And also I have some workflows baked into this so that when a new document comes in, if it's client facing, it'll say, I know what to do with client facing documents. I'm going to file it to that client's folder, Reardon Steel, into its compliance folder, and then rename it whatever type of document it is with the specific date. So that's one example of how we can use workflows to utilize that metadata. But like I said, let's go ahead and take a look quick. We're going to step into the admin console or the administration console and look at how we can create these. Be aware also, there's a very active user community within Laserfiche, and there are thousands and thousands of different metadata templates that exist out there. And many folks are more than happy to share with you templates that have worked for them and capture the type of data they want. Our team also has several examples that we'd be more than happy to share with you if you have a specific, if you can give us some direction anyway. Let's say that you're looking for specific client documents and you want to know what a client document template should look like. We'd be more than happy to help you out with that. We also help you put together lists and Excel sheets to help make those dynamic too. But we're going to go into our repository. I'm going to go into LF Business, expand that, and there we see metadata management. And here we can see we've got fields and also templates. One thing we haven't talked about today is tags. Tags is another type of metadata. There's two types of tags. There are the security tags, which is gold here. A security tag, when placed on a document or a folder, will lock it down, so the only people who can see it are ones that have access to that specific tag. The other tags are just regular tags, and they are a way to essentially just give a quick additional attribute to the folder or document. Some of the examples I have here are if something's expired, tag it expired. So then you can quickly look for all of my documents that are expired by looking for that tag. Anything that needs legal review can just be tagged as that. And then once they're done, they can easily remove that tag. So tagging and untagging is just another quick way to add a specific piece of metadata that's a little bit faster and more manageable. Not that metadata is not manageable, it's as easy as just selecting or typing something in, but tags are a quick way. So here you can see I actually have a lot of templates. The reason why you saw that my user only was able to open 3 or 4 is because we also have the ability to assign security to each one of these templates as well. Just like on the folders or the documents, you can add trustees and give them rights to either see or not see, read, modify, etc. So security is another reason why you would add metadata as well. But what we can see here is we're looking at our client documents metadata template. We gave it a name, client documents, and then we had to start identifying what types of characteristics, what types of attributes we're going to want to capture on every one of our client documents. I have seen templates that are 20 plus fields long that they think it's important for every document to have as much information as possible. and that's fine. But just know that it can be a little bit tedious, and you sometimes see people get a little overwhelmed or say, I'll get back to this later, or I'll add the metadata later, and then don't get around to it. I find that having a couple of required fields, and only a couple, like only a handful, is a great way to make sure that every document has the attributes that you want. So that way you're maintaining data integrity, and you're also not eating up a lot of time for your employees. So adding new fields is relatively easy. You can just select the next open space and choose from any of the fields that you have already made. If you want to create a new field, you can just type it in and it'll automatically add that to the list. You'll notice that the next piece here is type. All of these are text. By text, that means that it's just an open source field where you can type in whatever it is that you're trying to capture. It can be a number, it can be letters, it can contain special characters like ampersands or dollar signs. So that's probably what many of your fields are going to be. But if you want it to be a list field, you can identify it as such. When you identify it as list and select it, this edit list option is going to appear in the top right hand corner. So then you can start typing in information. And to add list values, you just hit enter after each one, and that'll start a new row. And so it doesn't really show the rows with lines or anything like that, but know that, if we did that, it would come up as 3 different options, either select type 1, type 2, or type 3. If you want to have blank added to the list, you just simply select the add blank to list checkbox here. You can also sort by ascending and descending, or if you hit none, it'll keep it in the order that you type it in as. Another one that's very important, especially if you're working with dynamic fields, and remember when I say dynamic fields, I'm talking about fields that are doing lookups to external sources like SQL. You'll want to make sure that there's enough allotted space for the value to actually be entered in here. So I usually just kind of default to 100 just to make sure. Now, granted, that's going to be overkill for many of these, especially if it's like a phone number. If it's a phone number, sure, keep it at 10, 12, whatever, in case people add dashes and things like that, but it's certainly not going to need to be 100. But it is something that you're going to have to be aware of, because it will error out and it will throw you it'll throw you an error if you try to put in or force a piece of data or force a value into the field and it doesn't fit. If you're going to have multiple different values in this, you can select multiple and it'll give you the ability to append and add additional values. Required will mean that you cannot save it until you've entered a value into that field. There's also the required for this template. Now that can be a little ambiguous, because if it's either required or not required, right? Like it shouldn't make any difference. But remember that when we're selecting these from a dropdown, we're selecting a field that exists out there, and it can be on multiple. Specifically, things like date. Date is very broad. A date can be applied to pretty much everything. And so if you say that this field is required, that required option is going to make it required on all the templates where date is there. So the option that I often go with is, since you're putting together a specific template, maybe leave this one alone for the most part and focus on the required for this template. Because chances are, if it is something that's been required across all of them, it's probably been marked as such before, and it'll obviously automatically pop up as required anyway. But I would say best practice is probably to keep that required for this template used rather than the other one. And I'm going to skip over indexed field formats, constraints, and description for today. Constraints, though, just a high level, is basically the ability to make sure that your actually, let's go ahead and take a look at that quick. So if you click on constraints here, you can say that you can add a regular expression. The way that I've used this in the past, and really the only ones that I use it on, are things like phone numbers. So if a phone number, you want always the phone number to be just 3 digits dash 3 digits dash 4 digits, and always the same. You can add some consistency, I guess, by adding that in. And there's a couple that are pre-built in here, and then you can also save others as well. The two examples are phone number and social security number. But I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. Hopefully that's all clear, that this is how you build out your template. The dynamic fields is where you would go in and start saying that we're going to make this these dynamic. It's going to ask you for which field name and where you want to have that look up to. Now, if you want to get into more details on that, let us know, and we can go through some more advanced training on that. I think there's actually a YouTube video out there on the CDI website where I talk about creating dynamic fields. But a quick snapshot, you'll first need to create your table in SQL and then register it as an external table. So metadata management, external tables. I've got a few here registered. It'll ask you for specific information like the database name, the schema, and what that table is or what it's called. And if it's correct, you can actually view that and see what that table is looking like. So then once we have, as you can see, the doc types table created, that'll then give us the ability to go into client documents, dynamic fields, and tell it specifically, look to external table called doc types, and for the external column called category, fill in field name with category and a sort ascending. You can then start adding field parent fields. So subcategory is going to be looking up to that same external table in SQL and filling in the subcategory option with subcategory. And the parent field is going to be category, which means it's going to limit it to the ones that have where that matches. Similarly, document type, the category and the subcategory both have to match or the document type won't be filled in. So what that looks like when we go into Laserfiche then, so we go to client documents, we have different categories here, like taxes, tax return. If we change that to planning, we'll have different plans. And then we have different options here as well. So that's how you can make it dynamic. All right. Lastly, there is the ability to group your different fields. The time that I often use that is if I'm trying to capture information like line items. Like if you want to maybe have an invoice come in and you want the invoice date, vendor name, total, but then you also want specific line items, you can add a group. The way that you do that would just say to index that and then say that it's going to, these two are going to be in the same group. The other side of this is fields. Know that you can change the fields individually, and you can also add the fields individually and then make them available to all the others if you don't want to create them on the template. Personally, I usually don't even go in here unless I need to make a change. Maybe I see a template field and think that, that's named, the name's a little bit long or something, or maybe I'd like to change the employee name to EE name or EE position instead. And so that's where you can go into the properties and rename the specific field. You can also do security or add security and make security changes per field as well. Just be aware that that would then apply to all the different templates that have that specific field. So you have to be a little bit careful and think a little bit larger when you're making changes like that. But this will tell you also which templates it belongs to. So if you have multiple templates with the same field on it, this will tell you that. So that's how you add fields, and that's how you add templates. And we've seen how they can be applied to documents and to folders. Now let's take a look at how we can actually use that to move a business process along. One of the examples I'm going to use is, let's say that you're working on projects. Now in here, I'm logged in as Steven. So let's say that Steven's a project manager. So the way that we have our folder structure set up is we have projects at the top, then we have our list of our project managers. Project managers can go in and they've got different folders to help keep track of whatever stage their projects are in. So if they want to go into their planning folders and find all their planning projects. It looks like I only have one active project right now. It's for the John Galt line. But if we want to go into planning and create a new project, we can do that. So we would go in, create a new folder by just right-click New Folder. You can also hit Control-N. That's a fast way to make folders. We'll go ahead and rename it with the name of this. I'm reading Atlas Shrugged right now, so everything is focusing around that. You can usually tell what I'm either reading or watching because I just pull from whatever the content is around me. So once we're in here, we can start saving our different folders and documents and signatures and things like that that will belong with the Taggart Transcontinental project. But what we really want to focus on now is adding the metadata, so that way we can keep track of the information about this project, but then also what stage it's in. So I'm going to add the project folder metadata template, and we have the project name. We'll call it the Taggart Rio line. We have the client name. We'll say that the project manager, as you can see, I'm pulling from an external table here. I've got my office characters. So we'll say Dwight Schrute's the project manager on this. We can estimate the total number of hours and give it a start date, maybe estimate a completion date as well, maybe 2 months out. And more importantly, we have the project status now. So right now we're just in planning. So we can add that. And now we can see that in our planning stage we have this. But maybe as we go through, we start to get all of our plans together. We get all the signatures. We put together a statement of work, and so now we're ready to send this out for signature. Well, once this project is just awaiting signature, we can go into the metadata. Another option, actually faster, is you can have this right here, View Metadata button. So you can select that, and it'll pop that right open. And I could say, you know what, we're waiting signature right now. We're no longer in the planning stage. And what that'll do is a workflow will see that it's changed, grab that, and automatically move it into the folder that's already in for the project manager into the awaiting signature location. So now I have nothing in planning. I have this in awaiting signature. So maybe those come back. Maybe we get the signatures we need. Next step would be to go in here and say, all right, this project is active, we're out and going. So you'll see it disappeared here. We go into our Steven folder, into active. We'll now see that Taggart Transcontinental is in our active folders. And we can apply that same type of logic to any of your current templates, any of your current projects. What I always recommend to folks is that you kind of whiteboard it first and look at different paths it can go down and identify ways that we can have that move automatically. But oftentimes what we'll see is little groups saying like awaiting signature from this person, awaiting signature from this, and just little drop downs of like, is it signed, yes or no? If it's yes, then go ahead and move it on to the next area. If a document is saved here that starts with this prefix or is named this, go ahead and change the status because we know that that's what we were waiting for. So you know your business better than we will. So if you can relay some of that information, gather it out, whiteboard it, we can look for opportunities to automate it. So that's all I had to show for that. There are a lot of great resources out there that will help you identify different ways that people have used metadata in the past, different types of fields, best practices. Laserfiche Answers is always a good one. That would be the Laserfiche user community. We also have the Solution Exchange as well. I'm a big fan of this one, youtube.com/user/citiesdigital. That's actually where this video will be posted by the end of the day today. So if we did move a little bit fast, I understand I speak quickly, but feel free to go back, revisit that video, watch it again, pause, rewind, take notes, and follow along. That'll be available there. Also, please, if you have any questions or want more information, you can reach us at consulting@citiesdigital.com or sales@citiesdigital.com, and we'll get somebody in touch with you. Just give us a quick, short one-sentence synopsis of what it is you're looking to do. Or if you just want to tell them, hey, just wanted to let everybody know that Steve's amazing and we really enjoy his webinars, I appreciate the feedback on that as well. With that, though, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. As a reminder, there's a questions drop-down on your floating GoToWebinar window. If you just type your questions in there, I'll be monitoring that. Quiet group, not seeing much. Maybe this was a review for a lot of you guys also, and that's certainly okay. Well, all right. If there are no questions, then I hope that all of you have a great rest of your week. Once again, this will be posted to YouTube by the end of the day, likely. And feel free to reach out, and also be sure to join us next month. Thanks, everybody.